Welcome back to Critical Thinking. This is a series of videos on how to have constructive public debates. Rule 49 says, at least be civil. And this rule from a workbook for arguments can be interpreted in many ways. I'm going to focus on things to avoid that would prohibit you from being civil in a public debate. So one way of not being civil is to have ad hominem attacks, where you attack a person instead of their argument. So you can see in the cartoon on the right, no, your face is a logical fallacy. This is an extreme version of an ad hominem attack, but attacking someone's person, such as physical features about them, even their character, that is not something that can directly prove their argument is incorrect. So suppose your opponent is greedy or is a jerk. Maybe they've mistreated their children or their employees. That does not prove that the claim or position they're arguing for is false. So ad hominem attacks, in addition to violating the rules of civility, they also will not do anything logically to prove your conclusion. So another way to break Rule 49 is what's called the genetic fallacy. This is arguing that a view is wrong because it originated from a morally bad or otherwise problematic source. It's called the genetic fallacy because the word genetic means genesis or origin of things. So here's an example. So you're saying that smoking tobacco is bad for your health. You know who else said that? Adolf Hitler. I rest my case. So this is something that, even though in the case of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, it's true they did believe that smoking was wrong and they tried to discourage people from smoking. They thought it was unhealthy. These were very bad people. However, that does not mean that their position is false. You'll see this all the time, though, in public debates, both in person and on the internet, that people will try to cast shade on a view based on the source where it came from, or other people who've argued for it, based on the personal characteristics of those people. So in a way, it typically kind of combines an ad hominem with the idea that this view originated from a bad source. So the way to assess the position or the claim is to look at the evidence to see whether it goes for it or goes against it. And actually, you can, logically speaking, ignore the source and just focus on the evidence. Another way of breaking Rule 49 is guilt by association. So this is arguing that your opponent is wrong because they or their ideas are associated with bad people. This is also a very common strategy, both in public debates and on the internet. Here's an example. Eric Weinstein is a part of the intellectual dark web, which includes problematic figures such as Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. And you can see they're all together here in this photograph. Therefore, don't believe anything Eric Weinstein says. Well, first of all, you could, challenge the position that Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro are problematic, or maybe one is problematic, the other isn't. You have to define what problematic means, etc. But even assuming the people Weinstein is with in this case are problems, it doesn't mean that Weinstein himself is, that his views are false. So mere association doesn't inherently taint a person's views and suddenly make them false. By the way, I'm using Weinstein as an example, but you could turn it around too. You might say, oh, Peterson went on Dave Rubin's show, but that doesn't, or that he was seen with Ben Shapiro. But if you think that Ben Shapiro's ideas are problematic, it doesn't necessarily mean that Peterson's are, etc., etc. The point is, the way this stratagem works is you're trying to show that someone's claims are false or their proposals are bad just based on people they've associated with. And often the way the game could be played is that if one person was on the podcast or the show or was participating in a panel, like a conference panel with someone else who's problematic, instantly that means all of their views are beyond the pale. But even if it was a bad decision on someone's part to interact with someone who's morally problematic, it doesn't mean, logically speaking, that their views are false. You have to focus on the evidence for or against the views and not just guilt by association. And then another way to violate Rule 49 is loaded language. Now, we've talked about this fallacy before in previous videos. However, it's a very common way to violate civility, so it's worth bringing up. Arguing with emotionally triggering words or phrases instead of reasons or evidence. So I'm giving you two complementary examples, just because typically if I were to give just one example that was targeting one political party or another, that might be seen as bias, but actually, it happens commonly on all sides of political and other debates. So here's an example of loaded language in claims about healthcare policy. Republicans are heartless scoundrels who would rather watch people die than give them a nickel to help pay for their health care. Versus Democrats are profligate fools who never met a spending bill they didn't like and who are leading this nation to financial ruin through unlimited government handouts. So you can see neither one of these claims really makes a substantive point against or for a policy position. It's kind of like name calling, so there's a little bit of ad hominem in there, but it's mainly using loaded language. So would rather watch people die. It implies that Republicans have no empathy. Profligate fools. Profligate means just spending lots of money. So it implies that Democrats are just being imprudent about public funds without giving any specifics, leading this nation to financial ruin. So it's trying to trigger fear in the audience, but not giving specific reasons why a policy will lead to financial ruin, etc. So the thing about loaded language is that it's often effective rhetorically in terms of triggering the audience's emotions, getting them on your side or angry against the other side or afraid of the other side. But logically speaking, it does not actually help prove your conclusion. So the ultimate justification for civility is going to be twofold. One, civility is a way of showing respect to the person you're debating. And you could think that there's an overarching moral reason for showing civility that's regardless of the logical reason. But the second reason is logical, that when the debate is civil, it's less likely to indulge in these argumentative strategies that just obscure things and trigger emotions instead of getting to the facts and the evidence. So there are two powerful reasons for following Rule 49.